G'day friends and fans, and welcome to Dave Talks Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 4th of December 2025. I'm your host, the author, David Applegate, and I'm bringing you neutral news, which means I piss off everybody, right? I piss off the left and the right, because I'm not bringing you the comfortable lies of the mainstream media, although we all have to rely on some news sources, and I try to bring you the best there is available instead of just bringing you the sensational slop of the Sun, the Telegraph, the MSNBCs. I mean, most of the mainstream media doesn't care about this war. They care about the clicks. But the war isn't bringing them ratings, so they ignore it most of the time. There's actually very few dedicated people, and most of those who are dedicated to this war somehow miraculously get lots of views, except for me, and they produce such slop. And they come to my channel all the time, giving me downvotes and claiming that I'm a Russian bot. And I ask them, have you watched my video? And they will not answer you. See, obviously, based on some of their comments, they haven't. As I pretty much pointed out, where Ukraine, how could Ukraine be winning if the Russians keep advancing? Or that even the diehard Ukrainian supporters are now admitting that Ukraine is running out of time, it is running out of men, but most of all, it's running out of money. Like I said, there are now reports, British Financial Times being one of them, says that Ukraine's debt may have reached $400 billion. For a country that's GDP was $127 billion before the war, may have dropped to as low as 57 or 52, depending on different sources. And that Ukraine is being now pushed to a critical deadline. It is facing a demographic decline. If it runs out of young men, it is no longer a country. It is dead. It is already running out of old men. It only has mostly under 18s left, most of whom are never coming back to Ukraine. Most of them have left the country. The government's only chance is to reorganize quickly a peace deal and bring back, somehow, lure back the people who left. Because remember, the majority of men left Ukraine. Zelensky only came to power because of selective voting. Most of those who could vote left. Ukraine was in turmoil when Zelensky came to power. 30% of the country was unable to vote. Nobody wants to admit what a mess Vladimir Zelensky has made of Ukraine. According to many commentators, not just Trump expected, based on many sources, that there would eventually be a deal. You saw Europe go to Trump and talk about a deal, but then there was no deal. They now claim that Trump has no leverage. He can threaten many others with military action, but he cannot threaten Putin. He cannot threaten Zelensky. If he threatens Putin, China backs Putin. If he threatens Zelensky, all of Europe, well, most of Europe, will back Zelensky. Sanctions harsh enough to damage Russia will destroy the Western economy, because Russia will never trade with us again, and many other trading partners of Russia will remain within the BRICS alliance and just wait for the inevitable collapse of the United States. The Ukraine war is a lose-lose situation in which Zelensky is hoping everybody will blink for him. Ukraine, without further manpower from its allies, let alone further support. Now, the problem is Ukraine spent all its credibility in 2022 when it promised a ceasefire. It was given a second chance. It again promised a ceasefire, and yet time and time again the Ukraine glazers keep saying it's Russia's fault. Why would Russia break its own... I keep asking people, why would Russia break its own ceasefire when it was about to get everything that it wanted? Now, there's a revised revision of the framework. Again, we have many people on the left barking about Donald Trump, but remember, officials from the Biden administration never did anything other than... Now, the Ukrainian army is allegedly undersupplied, lacks motivation, and in fact every offensive has achieved the opposite, has eventually led to more territory seized. There are now 255,000 cases of unauthorized absence, 56,000 cases of desertion. Now, a lot of these are AWOL, but 21,000 troops have officially missing, gone from the country. Others are in hiding, allegedly, still in the country. Now, demographically, Ukraine's population has fallen from 50 million at independence to now 31 within its territory. Births are far below death rate. Of course, first option is to accept all of Putin's terms. They're not going to do that. But at least right now, both sides have accepted some terms. The second option, someone comes in and rebuilds the Ukrainian army, command system, more weapons, but of course, it has to be a foreign army or the million-plus Ukrainian males who are outside Ukraine. But the rate of training, it'll take too long. So the third option is to maintain the status quo and hope that continued precision strikes on Russian oil grinds the Russian economy to a halt, all waiting for Putin to die. Guess which option Vladimir Zelensky has chosen? That's right, he has chosen 3. He has chosen yet again to launch long-range strikes and covert actions against the Russian economy. Because his economy has collapsed. He has nothing to lose anymore other than his life, and that is the most dangerous part. Because now, if Russia may begin and have indicated that they are willing to systematically destroy Ukrainian cities. But telling people this somehow makes me a Putin puppet, while I'm warning you that if you continue to poke the bear will only get angrier, the bear will only get way more destructive, and Ukraine has committed itself to the third option, so its European partners are pushing Ukraine off a cliff and preparing to jump in after them. The war costs more than 100% of the gross domestic product of Ukraine. The EU is unable to match Ukraine's budget in the long term. They are already in debt, and debt is growing. The United States can't continue to grow its debt. Russia and China are all hoping that the US will collapse, not blink, collapse. Trump is trying to avoid this because any wider war in Europe is instantly a economy killer. Because where do your exports grow? What do you depend on? Only 60% of your economy is internal. You'll suffer major economic collapse if... Now, of course, the reason why Ukraine thinks it can hold on is, 1, they got 49 new tanks within the last month. Though they were delivered in stages since July 2025, the bulk and the last of them have arrived. Not just M1 Abrams, but B1 Centurios from Italy. However, there are now reports that this is the last shipment ever. Italy says that it can no longer afford to supply equipment to Ukraine. Allegedly. There is no confirmation. Right now it is just a single news article without but who knows, right? Within the last hour, it could have changed. This is the problem. Hour by hour, news stories are changing. I'm trying to bring as the most up-to-date information as I can. Now, Challenger 2s, 14 were sent in March 23. They've been used as proved highly survivable. No, they are, when crews are dying and injured, most of the time they are able to repair the tanks. But there is, and of course, multiple times the tanks have only been in rear support, basically nowhere near the front lines. Now, in development and production is the Rheinmetall Lynx. Now, this is a replacement for the Murder infantry fighting vehicle. Production is expected to begin late 2025. And, of course, the hybrid Marta S and the T-72 hybrids are ongoing, with the hybrid T-72 with a Marta Howitzer being allegedly developed in Poland to replace the Crab. This has been unrevealed in August. They apparently have begun testing, and the tank has allegedly made a test debut. Now, in November, Italian tank destroyers arrived and did actually score some hits. Now, still, according to many sources, the most effective vehicle is the Bradleys, and the most survivable vehicle so far has been the Bradleys. But it's not just tanks, there are new artillery. Now, the Archer is from BAE Systems is one of the most common, though the most successful artillery is the M777. Now, according to some reports, America is moving away from M777s and is selling them off to Europe. Now, the Australian Army has provided these to, has bought some and provided them to Ukraine. There's also the Huntsman, another self-propelled howitzer based on the South Korean K9. This one has a range of up to 60 kilometers using guided munitions. Now, these are allegedly a hybrid rocket artillery. That is a tank shell with extra propellant post launch. So it's fired out of a barrel, but it also has extra propellant. It's a large shell. It's guided self-propelled artillery. And then, of course, there's the German Boxer, basically with a remote control howitzer to basically reduce crew deaths and be able to conduct counter-battery fire against Russia's entrenched artillery, though Russia is also moving away from entrenched artillery to self-propelled guns, but at a much slower pace, which again has Western commentators salivating at the prospect of Ukrainian artillery dominating the battlefield with less artillery using guided munitions, particularly backed by the Swedish and British with the Archer, to basically fire and move under 30 seconds. But that's because it's basically it's loaded with a set amount of shells into a big cartridge system. So these shells are basically packed, wrapped, sealed in, and hopefully, nothing goes wrong, because if anything goes wrong, it's just returned to base. But towed systems are becoming second-tier systems. Now, in Ukraine, the amount of tanks as of last month, this hasn't updated that regularly. In fact, it's still, some of the news cuts off in 23, some cuts off in 24. But as of June 25, Ukrainian forces allegedly have lost 1,203 tanks, of which 882 were completely destroyed, 80 were damaged, 95 were abandoned, and 146 captured by the Russians. Now, you might say, what happened if they abandoned tanks? Does that not mean the Russians captured them? No, abandon means they're sitting in fields unable to be repaired. damaged. That means they're possibly able to be repaired, but they haven't been. These are tanks that have been towed back to either Poland or Germany and haven't returned. Same with the 95. They're probably gone to be recycled, but they haven't been replaced. 882 were destroyed in combat. 82 damaged in combat. 95 abandoned in combat. And of which, so that all adds up, right? That the manpower situation, primarily, now this may or may not be true, Ukraine loses 4 crews to Russia's 3 crews. Tank crews apparently are the primary deaths, usually because drones don't do enough damage to the tanks, but they definitely concuss and injure crews, and a lot of them are irreparable, right? Brain damaged or injured from the explosions. Tanks can be repaired, but humans less so. So over time, you still have T-55s, often used as training tanks. There aren't that many left. There aren't that many left of the T-62s. Most of the tanks in the Ukrainian army were T-72s, but over time they've captured a bunch of T-80s, not many, though they originally had over 100 restored to service that they had acquired in 2015. So they've gained from 130 to 156. So they haven't captured that much equipment. The T-84, unless they're a domestic tank, only 5 in active service since 2021 with the 14th Mechanised Brigade. Tank factory destroyed, apparently. That has not been confirmed. T-90, captured equipment. Although they did have 12 to start with, they captured 2. So, all these memes and talks about Ukraine capturing hundreds of tanks. Captured 2 T-90s. Wow. Captured a handful, right? 26 T-80s. Now, the PT-91 from Poland. Now, that's not disclosed, but according to people who count shipments, at least 60 shipments, which could be 60 to 120 tanks, although it just says here 60. Leopard 1. Germany pledged 88, of which Norway and others have added to that. According to the different pledges, this puts the number over 270. Though many have said just by spring. So there's no confirmation that all have arrived in Ukraine, because there's been pictures of Leopards in Poland being repainted and given Ukrainian markings. Same with the Leopard 2. Not all have arrived. It's not known how many, but it's at least pledges add up to over 167. Challenger 2, 14. Now, there was allegedly more to come from Canada. We have not seen that. But Leopards, yes. Now, it's also thought that news services could be confusing Leopard and Challengers, because as far as I know, Canada only pledged to purchase and did not purchase Challenger tanks, and Britain may not be exporting Challengers as well. They weren't Challengers too. They were Challengers. But again, there are tanks missing from this, although technically the M2 Bradleys is listed as an infantry fighting vehicle. Again, it's been more successful at killing Russian tanks than the Abrams. Again, that's only because there were 14 active. There were 19 initially delivered. Of the 31 initially delivered, 19 have been visually confirmed or destroyed or damaged. Again, that's because they were primary targets. and they were raced into battle thinking that they would be invincible against Russian artillery, and they often got detracked and then smashed over time by artillery and were unable to be rescued by crews. And eventually 19 have been confirmed or captured or damaged. But starting in October, there was an announcement for additional Abrams. July 25, the majority of tanks had been delivered. The last tanks have been delivered, taking it to a total of 80. But just because this is just the total number of tanks, again, 1,203 tanks, the majority destroyed. Ukraine, that's why Ukraine is in such a bad position, because there isn't 882 new tanks. That would require factories, multiple factories producing dozens of tanks. And remember, they lost those over 4 years, so they need to at least triple tank production just to meet Ukraine's orders. And don't forget, Europe is behind on its own equipment by years. Ukraine, look at how France is producing hardly anything because it's primarily focused on building fighters, of which allegedly 100 Rafales is going to Ukraine, which nobody will announce if, how, or when they've been funded or to be delivered. But according to some sources, mid-25. Now, can all these new weapons, right, these new alleged new tanks being developed, new guns, if they're in sufficient quality and quantity to bring Ukraine up to 1,200 and, let's say, to 1,200 tanks and 1,200 artillery pieces. That will just bring them up to 2022, which means they'll be able to hold. But again, Russians are out producing them on both ammunition and tanks. So it would have to be a massive increase, of which Europe cannot afford, Russia cannot afford, and US appears to be reaching peak production as well, unless they dramatically do something radical like slash all wages, slash all prices, bring in emergency rationing on steel, and basically take over 80% of production like they did in World War II. Because Russia has a 30% industrial lead in tanks and artillery, but the West has a 50% industrial lead in aircraft. Now, these, again, are only all estimates from various sources, and various sources always state either the worst-case scenario or propaganda for purposes. There's been so many people who have tried to confirm Russia's production capabilities, but just by counting tanks coming off the trains at Rostov, Russia is maintaining its tank stocks where Ukraine is slowly declining. But most Russian tanks are not going to the battlefield. They are being stockpiled. Again, because Russia believes Europe is using Ukraine as a proxy to weaken Russia set up for a bigger war. And the more people talk about going to war with Russia, the more it will happen. This is called manufactured consent. They did this in World War I. Since 1909, they kept talking about war, and what happened? You eventually got one. World War II, it's the same thing. Germany didn't attack Poland because they suddenly woke up and says, Poland's the enemy. No, they said, Russia's preparing to invade Poland. We have to get out. We don't want them to take everything for themselves. We need to secure our flanks. People forget that. People really do not know history. They know propaganda. And most people don't want to give up their propaganda because it makes them feel superior. And they don't want to admit that They want the drama, they want the arguments, they want the tears, they want somebody to smear, lie and slander because it makes them feel superior. They don't want the truth, so they don't watch the truth. They watch the headlines and go with whatever the robot media tells them to go with, whatever YouTube puts forward as trusted sources. And here we have no change in Kupiansk, no change really north of Lyman, and then in the Lyman area, again, no change. No major shelling of Lyman either, by the way. It is believed that they want the Russia will pass Lyman, cut it off. They want Lyman and the surrounding area intact. They want to do it's here the Zelensky line is their real target. Lyman, like Seversk, were once big, important areas in transport and logistics during the Soviet Union. These towns have declined as Ukraine built up its fortress, what they called now the Zelensky line. This is the second Zelensky line. The first one back here is completely fallen. Seversk was part of that line. Now, this line was meant to be the third line. This is the centre line, and this the first line in what they called the Soviet defence line if the British captured Crimea and tried to invade up to Moscow. There was also the Kursk line with Kiev and all, Kursk, back here, the Kursk-Bryansk line. They would go through, basically using half of Ukraine as a in the West as a buffer between the Soviet Union and Russia. And then when Ukraine got its independence, they sort of had the economic benefit of being a Russian trading partner and that as that independent buffer zone. But when Russia noticed Ukraine was building up more and more on their border, not on the western border for defence. And then eventually they noticed more and more European advisors, and basically, when questioned, even they kept saying they were pro-Russian, but eventually the mask slipped and Ukrainian nationalists completely flipped the tables on Russia, claiming, making all sorts of outrageous claims, when the reality was, and even Poland admits, that Eastern Europe fared worse in some parts, but Ukraine, the reason why they don't like Ukraine is Ukraine was the jewel and pampered child of the Soviet Union. It was the home of revolutionary. It was believed to be so communist that Russia would fall before Ukraine, you know? Anyhow, you have Russia heading the Zelensky line, not making any significant progress, but they have made some, closing the gap here. That's about it. Again, they've made some breakthroughs here in the north, but nothing significant. They've just broken through Ukraine, but they have broken through Ukrainian lines. They've made no breakthrough. Fighting continues here. See, Ukraine says, "Oh, there's fighting here in Pavlovsk. That means we control Pavlovsk." And it's like, no. Even your own maps say you don't control Pavlovsk. But there is fighting here at Radin. The Russians have made some, but not much progress. Not much else anywhere else. Here and there, it's just higgly-piggly lines. Nothing really significant. But they are moving in. They have moved a little bit closer here on the river. Again, the assault forces hitting Hulopol. Still not confirmed whether or not the Russians taken ProWritingAid, but some sources say they have, some sources say they haven't. Now, it could be the case that, again, Ukraine always waits a week before updating the map in some areas because they might counter-offense in that time and take it back. They've failed to take back Pokrovsk. They've only made a few dents in the map, but those are just areas where the Russians, due to the cold or whatever, have not been able to flank and take out. But remember, this north side of the railway line ain't Pokrovsk, it's Ravine. Although there could be that side of the rail line, and that side of the rail line there is... So it could be that Pokrovsk is up to here. But again, this little blip on the map, I think, is primarily due to trip rotations, field commanders laying a trap, like it's called an artillery trap or the Russian cauldron, where you leave this big open area and say, "Here I am, come get me, kill me, come kill me, I'm right here. No, don't go around, come forward." You've seen traps, you know what they are. Just sometimes you don't immediately recognise it and you think, oh, Ukraine's taken territory. No, it's a trap. It's a trap to have Ukraine rush in, and Ukraine doesn't. Ukraine hasn't fallen for every trap that Russia's laid. Doesn't stop Russia laying them. Now, the EU is proposing to steal Russian assets. However, Belgium said no. And, of course, outside immediately... a rent-a-crowd of Ukrainians activists appeared because they don't have jobs, so they're paid a rent. They're paid a nice little stipend, so they can go. It's within their interest to continue the war. Remember, folks, those who yelled the loudest for you to give up more are often the recipients and do nothing and give up nothing. This is your typical Euro fash. Now, according to this, they want to. They've reduced it from all 300 billion euros down to 90 billion euros to go to Ukraine, which is the value of the euro has dropped to 105 billion. Has dropped. So this is not even 1 year. They say it's to support Ukraine's war against Russia for 2 years. 105 billion. That's what they spend. That's less than they spend in a year. Russia's spending about 127, but of course, 54 of that money is going on just to the army, whereas in Ukraine, half their expenditure has to go on feeding its population, its food budget, because it has a dramatically reduced food production. Now, Europe, of course, is going to be the beneficiary of the bulk of this 90 billion euro deal, because remember, originally it was like 146 billion, of which half would go to Ukraine. Now it's down to 90, but still most of it's going on weapons, which means Ukraine ain't getting the money. Of course, it's technically a loan from the private market and calling it a reparations loan funded by state assets. But those assets will be forfeited to repay that loan because Russia can't transfer any money to them to buy back their own assets. Again, they claim it's 2/3 of financing for 2 years, and then want the rest from international partners to cover. Russia's war of aggression. Of course, this always panders to the left-wing low IQ mentality. But it was aggression against Germany, which caused World War II. If Germany had been contained as originally planned under the 1924, Wilson. But then Wilson caved to the international bankers and withdrew from the because the bankers wanted to rob Germany. Always the short-term profit. Always thinking might makes right, that good will triumph in the end, and all the other platitudes. But ultimately, a US expert, allegedly at the Cato Institute, Doug Bando, though sources do confirm that he does believe the US administration should not provide security guarantees because it'll trigger a hypothetical war. This is based on Korea, Vietnam, and even the possibility of, remember the Berlin War, possibility there. America almost went to war in the Berlin airlift, in the Cuban Missile Crisis. That if you keep giving out these security guarantees, like Bush pledged to include Kiev in NATO, is it worth going to war for a piece of dirt which is going to cost you more as a NATO ally than as a trading partner? And why do you need to put missiles in Ukraine? Don't you have enough missiles? It's never enough, says the warmongers. You got to buy more missiles. You got 9,600 missiles? No, make it 12,000 missiles. Sitting around doing nothing. But except making money for the warmongers, of course. But the left will go, it's for security! It's my security! It's all what they're just told to say. Hey, old folk, you want to go out and protest? I'll give you some pudding. You know, lefties are there. The party's always right mentality. I'm surprised. Now, elements of the peace plan have been leaked. One of the elements is about the size of the army. Again, been reported in Russia that there are 4 separate plans, 4 separate about sovereignty, security guarantees for Europe, security guarantees for Ukraine, and of course, sovereignty, like limits of the army, peacetime, range of its missiles, economic cooperation. Now, there was 28, but it's a draft of which has been broken now into 4 separate documents. These are allegedly 4 documents that are now floating around Brussels and being discussed in separate committees. But as far as Russia's concerned, this war is about distracting the European population from the rampant corruption in Ukraine and ultimately the EU, who are funding and who are the ones buying off these politicians, and then getting shocked when the Ukrainian corruption network finds out. They're not supposed to find out, but the Ukraine, it's like like a director in Hollywood. Goes out in a sprinting. It's like directors in Hollywood. You know when they're going to come up with a new movie because they go out on a spending spree. It's why movies costing more and more money, because you chumps just keep going to the movies no matter what. Well, that stopped, didn't it? COVID taught you how to live without movies, without new movies. Gen Z are discovering that the originals are better than the remakes. So every time they hear a remake, they go out and find the original on the internet, often free, and watch it on YouTube for free. And it's killing Hollywood. And do I care? No, because Hollywood shit all over me. Why do I care about Hollywood? They don't care about me. Just like, why should I care about Ukraine? All they want is my money. They have nothing to offer. And it's not my Christian duty to support the parasites of this world. Don't we have our own to take care of? Does not charity begin at home? Apparently, no. We have to give hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. That's more than their GDP. More than twice their GDP a year. And nobody says, where's all the rest of the money going? Because it's hear no evil, speak no evil, while the banks just grow wealthier because it's all borrowed money. And the taxpayer keeps getting squeezed to pay it all off because the nandy-dandies, the well-to-do, well-heels, all know they can stir the protest mob with a little bit of promises of a pension increase. But in reality, Of course the banks could afford a pension increase because they're getting even more money out of the taxpayer, and the taxpayer has no voice. It's the professional protesters who have all the voice. Those who want to collapse society know that the more we spend, the closer we get to a Soviet-style collapse. And the war mafia, according to Peter Severo, is pretty much controlling the EU. Now, according to this, that it's not 90 billion, it's 135 billion to prop up Kiev. But of course, kickback schemes, graft and all that, you can guarantee they want all 300 billion. It's just a matter of time. They first need to get away with stealing a little bit. It's like the kid who steals a cookie and your mum notices and goes, yeah, it's only one cookie. The next day it's 2, 3, and then you eat the packet of biscuits a day, and then you get spanked. And, well, Putin's decided, well, we'll take this territory, either military or by other means. If you do not cede this territory, we will just keep taking this territory. That you had the power to, in an interview today with India Today, that you had the power to stop the killing. Just let go of the Donbass region. Let it go. Move on. Isn't that what the left keep telling us to do? Oh, yes. The illegals killed this woman. Just move on. Oh, it's theft. Oh, it's just property. The left keep telling us, oh, if it saves one life, give up all guns. Well, if it saves one life, why don't you give up all that territory? It will save one life, won't it? It'll save lives. Why don't you give up? See, the left never, ever, ever live by their principles. Their principles are merely rules to use against you. There are no rules for the left. Russia tried to build up relations, but Kiev would not stop its war against the people of the DPR. There was a referendum. They refused to withdraw their troops. For 12 long years, Ukraine has been at war with itself. Russia's only been involved since 2022, although, yes, it technically was involved before that, but I mean, Russia never directly intervened. And they basically, the Americans were allegedly trying to bring peace, but every time you get the Bush-Cheney or the Clinton-esque Obama or the Obama-Bidens, the Obama-Bidens, oh, Russia wants this territory, we'll give the Ukrainians lots of weapons, that'll stop them. 2016, they said to Trump, I'll just send some Obama sent blankets. Ukraine's asking for missiles. These missiles will definitely stop. And they actually did stop the Russian army in 2022. The problem is missiles run out. And US cannot stockpile missiles faster than they are used. And despite what you may think, not all missiles hit their target. And as soon as the Ukraine started spreading all these TOW and all these other missiles over the battlefield, Russia started targeting those missiles. First they sent in snipers to snipe the operators, and they actually stole, in many cases, stole equipment. Plus they had the advanced detection systems they got left behind in Afghanistan, plus the infrared night vision so they could walk around at night and snipe the Ukrainians. And then when the Ukrainians introduced drones to the battlefield, well, that was a lie. China and India and Iran sold drones to both sides. This is alleged that everybody, right? The only people who haven't sold arms to each other, I wouldn't be surprised if one day Ukraine got desperate, is, remember, Ukraine's been selling a lot of arms, which you can actually find out. Sweden accused them of selling arms to Islamists in Sweden. Italy said they were selling, was it Italy? I think it was Italy, said arms sent to Ukraine was sold to terrorists in Sudan. And they would turn around and buy cheap ammunition and arms from, with the proceeds, the Ukrainian weapons brokers would buy stuff from China, particularly drones. Nobody in this war is clean. No war is clean. People want to think of a clean war. Well, there isn't such a thing as clean war. Okay? But most people only want to watch these short videos where they get told comfortable lies so they can feel good about themselves. Thank you to those glorious, brave few who watch me. Like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. Despite everything, our numbers are slowly growing. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. Thank you to everybody who supported the channel. My links are in the link tree, description below, or in my profile. Of course, you can scan the QR code on the screen. I appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video. Bye for now.